Welcome to Tube Amp Theta, where we live in harmony with wine, tubes, and technical advice at D-Lab Electronics. So what do I have to present to you today at Tube Amp Theta? We have a Harmony Model 415 vintage tube amplifier in need of repair. This amp was recently purchased, and shortly after it arrived, all the problems started rearing their ugly heads. So the owner, after hand delivering it to D-Lab Electronics, gave me this hit list. So here's some of the issues. Regardless of the jack or channel, when you plug in, you either get little sound or it'll make a loud hum. Then it says if you wiggle the cable, you'll get some very loud pops and hum that then likely will not stop until you turn off the amplifier. It's got a bit of an attitude. So there's other things listed, but the other thing that the customer would like when I'm done, if successful, is to add a input jack for maybe an MP3 player or iPod so they can play along with the amp. So if I do that, we'll put it around the back side so that we don't interrupt the artwork on the front of the amp. A very vintage, cool piece. Let's see what it's doing. So here it is, the Harmony Model 415. Let's give her a look over. There's your channel inputs. Channel 1, Channel 2, tremolo, and of course the power area. Now you'll note it doesn't have reverb, which is kind of strange for an amp this large, but that's how they did it back then. Let's take a look around the back. So here we are backside. I've already removed this access panel so that we can see the speakers and the chassis. The service literature is still here, which is great. There's the tube layout. Runs a pair of 6BQ5 output tubes. Schematic, very cool. Has some newer Weber type speakers. Let's take a look at the chassis. Got a light here so you can see our preamp tubes. There's the output tubes, output transformer, power transformer, and rectifier tube. But the first thing that caught my eye is take a look at this filter cap. See all this stuff? She's a dripping. Filter cap is obviously toast, which is probably causing a lot of the hum, snaps, and pops that the owner is experiencing. So we're going to have to get that thing out of there and inspect it and see what else the amp needs. Before we do anything with the amp, I want to give it an initial test, okay? I'm not going to run it very long if I start hearing a lot of hum, because I already suspect the filter cap is bad. However, somebody might have put in new caps underneath the chassis that we can't see. Alright, so what I've done is I've connected my scope right across the speaker terminals, so we will see what those speakers are seeing. I've got the amp right now powered. We're in standby. Both channels volumes are at minimum, and of course the tremolo is off. So let's kick her on. Oh, surprise, surprise. Did you see that? That was pretty cool. Snap, pow. So there's obviously some sensitivity in the preamp. It's doing all that all by itself. It's very cool. I guess if you want some fuzz effects, man, this jobber's got it going on. Let's see what we got here. Oh! Alright, so we actually have some corroded input jacks. More than likely a little cleaning might take care of it, or I'll have to replace the jacks. But the thing I don't see is 60 cycle hum on that trace, which is interesting because that filter cap looks like it's shot. So the next thing we need to do is get that chassis out and see what's been done to this amp. So real quick before we pull the chassis, I just want to make sure that the amp actually amplifies, right? So I have an audio generator hooked up. See what we get. Alright, so that's a good sign. And the sine wave looks good. So more than likely we just have some rotten connections on the preamp and maybe some corroded input jacks. Let's get it apart. Alright, I've got the amp pulled. It's quite the task. You actually have to pull the whole front baffle board out. So speakers and everything got to come out. Then there's just a couple screws and the amp will lift off of the little wood platform. So if we take a look underside here, let me switch hands so you can see what's going on. You can see there is some evidence of past maintenance. Got a couple orange droppers in there. And then remember the filter cap I told you was dripping? Well, somebody strapped in a 22 microfarad right there, probably to get rid of the noise. But the thing you should be doing, especially on a vintage amp, is change the entire filter cap. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. So I'm going to change the cap. We're going to clean the contacts on these input jacks and give it a test. So I made another little discovery that I wanted to point out before I get in here and correct it. If you look at this resistor right here, it's a 100 ohm resistor, and that takes off and goes to pin 9 of both of the 6 BQ5s. Now if you look at the schematic, there's pin 9, comes down here and it goes to a 560 ohm resistor, 1 watt, which junctions with the 10K resistor. So that's a screen supply to the 6 BQ5s. It's not supposed to be a 100 ohm resistor. And that's why if you look, you can see a little bit of discoloration right here in the center. She's getting kind of hot because it's actually underrated. So we got a little bit of cleanup work to do, but first off we'll get the filter cap out because you can see the stains underneath. Get him out and rearrange these components and get it in the proper configuration. So at this point it's still a mystery to me why this amp isn't humming, because we know this filter cap is shot. Alright, so if you go up here you'll see that that main filter cap is a 4-section. It's C10, 11, 12, 13, right? And there it is on the schematic. So what I have to replace it with is one of these CE distribution multi-section caps. These are about 40 bucks a pop, but they'll fix the problem and maintain the original look of the amp. So the easiest way to change these caps is get under these terminals, just clip these off, okay? And that will leave you a road map of the connections. And of course, luckily we have, this one's fighting me, isn't it? There we go. Luckily we have the schematic to reference. So the main thing is get this guy out, get the new one in, we'll get her wired up. Alright, I got it loose. So there's the old guy. You can see massive leakage. Like I say, I'm really shocked that this thing wasn't a hum monster. So I got to clean up the chassis. We'll get the new cap in, wire it up, we'll do an initial test, and hopefully this thing works better. It should. So before you mount your new filter cap, clean off the goo. No reason to leave that crap on there. It's nasty and it's corrosive. So get all this cleaned up, mount the cap, and get her wired. Alright, new filter cap is in place. I've tweaked the little tabs here to hold it. Okay, so it's locked down to the chassis. I've aimed the half moon tab at this post that goes over to the rectifier tube, because that one is the highest capacitance. Okay, so we're ready to wire except for the ground connection. Now that one takes a special device, and not many shops have it, but D-Lab does, and guess what it is? That's right.
Relax. Light up an old
Snozzeramus! Solder that connection, Snozzeramus.
A lot of people wonder where ghouls come from.
Look at there.
Oh, they come
the
from
massive
all over.
heat of the younger.
Yep. A lot of ghouls come from Portugal.
Alright, so at this point we need to get these leads off of the old tabs. So I'm just going to kind of wet my soldering iron. Then we're going to use some solder wick. Pull the solder off these old tabs. Then I'll be able to take the leads and land them back where they used to be. Alright, music of the night. Joe Jackson's new Fool CD. If you guys are Joe Jackson fans, you've got to get this CD. It is unbelievable. Alright, so the new filter cap section is wired up. Now we need to go over and correct the issues with the input jacks. So pretty much you just get a burnishing tool, put it between these contacts, do a little sand job there. Just got to be careful not to bend the contacts, be nice to it, and that will remove the corrosion. Do not try this with sandpaper or file, or you will totally damage the jacks and have to replace them. Alright, so here's our setup for the initial test after the replacement of the filter cap and cleaning those input jacks. So I got my scope hooked up to the D-Lab audio test set. That is hooked across the speaker output of the amp. We have an audio generator set up, which is not connected yet. We're going to initially bring her up on the variac so that we don't damage this new filter cap with a surge, right? So I'm going to bring him up. You can see the current coming up. About 50 volts there. So she's coming up. No smoke. Good sign. Keep advancing the variac. And there is about 100 volts applied. Obviously do not see any output because I'm not applying a signal. So let's tap on it and see if we still have the sensitivity on the scope. Tap on the chassis here, right? Remember all the lightning storms we had? There's still some little spikes there. That's probably a tube issue, but the massive crashes are gone. So let's put a signal into it. Alright, I'm off the variac. We got full power applied. Audio test set is still monitoring the output as well as the scope. Now we're going to give her input with the audio generator. And if you look at the scope, there she is, nice and clean. Now the other complaint was that the tremolo was not working, so let's advance that. There she is, boing, 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 boing. Go with my speed adjustment, boing, 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 boing. Lots of boinging going on there. So the tremolo appears to be working. And that circuit, of course, was coming off of the filter cap. So if that filter cap had some issues like leakage pulling that voltage down, that would affect the intensity of the tremolo. So everything looks like it's working and the amp looks pretty quiet. Just need to check the tubes and then we'll hook her back up to the speakers and see what it sounds like. I got her powered up. I'm just looking at the scope for noise. You can see you got quite a bit of noise in this 12AX7. If I rock it, I get the same thing, so I'm guessing corroded connections in the tube socket. So we'll take those guys out, clean the pins, put a little deoxit in there, and see if the problem goes away. Alright, so I cleaned the tube pins, put some deoxit in the sockets. She's pretty clean. Sensitivity's gone. Next, let's put the speakers on it, see what it sounds like. So here we go, a live test with a guitar. I don't claim to be a guitar player. D-Lab can do a lot of things, but playing guitar is not one of them. Alright, so here we go. Got the tremolo going. It's off. So that's working. Here's the tone. Yep. Seems to be a lot better than what it was when it came here, huh? There is still some noticeable background hiss. You can hear it. That's not the tubes doing it. My guess is possibly it has something to do with these input jacks. They're cheap. They got these cheap nuts. And watch when I move this plug. Hear it? And there's slop in these jacks. So right now the best thing to do would be to remove those and install some switchcraft jacks. Make sure our grounds are good. Make sure everything's cool between those jacks and the preamp tubes. I'll take that up with the owner. Alright, so what's the lesson learned about this video? Well, if you are repairing classic amplifiers and you kind of cheap out, don't put in quality components, and the thing fails and goes to another shop, you might be able to see it on YouTube, like this one. So another most excellent episode of Tube Amp Theta. I'd clap, but I'd probably spill my wine. By the way, the wine in the night is Manager Troy's. Why would anybody name their wine that? I don't get it. Hope you enjoyed it. Tune in again to Tube Amp Theta.